Everybody wants to know how to change people. And if you clicked on this video, that means that's probably something that you're concerned with as well. So by the end of this episode, you'll understand why that never works and then what to actually do instead. If you're new to the channel, my name is Thaddeus Ford. I'm an artist, a coach, and a heart attack survivor. I teach people how to break chains and turn pain into purpose. So if you're tired of pouring into people and not seeing the change that you'd like to see, this episode is for you. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And most of us, at some point in our lives, have experienced relationships, whether it be professional or personal, where we have had a desire to affect change in someone's life. And I submit that more times than not, that comes from a place of care. That comes from a place of caring. If you run your own business, you have a desire to have a business that is functioning, that is profitable. So you care. So you have employees that you want to affect change with. So we understand that in our personal relationships, if you've been married or if you've been in a committed relationship, you care about this person. And so you have a desire to affect change in their lives where you can see certain areas of weakness in their lives. If you're a parent and you have children, that's a great example because you've got years of experience, literally and figuratively, whereas you have seen things, you've experienced things that this child has not. So from that vantage point, you want to impact their lives and hopefully save them from some of the things that you've experienced. So more times than not, I truly, genuinely believe that when we care about something or someone and we want to see changes made, it's because it's coming from a place of love and of care and consideration, empathy, all the good things. What ends up happening, though, oftentimes is when our best efforts fall short, that's when our good intentions turn sour. And what do I mean by that? First of all, no one changes until they're ready. There's absolutely nothing you can do to change someone who doesn't allow for it in their lives. And that could mean, from a thought process, the way they think, the way they see things. It could be from a perspective of how they do things, but no one changes until they're ready. You can imagine, someone, in a castle, medieval times, and there's a ditch or, and there's a bridge. If they raise the bridge up, you can't get to the castle. You're going to drown in this proverbial ditch. People change when they put that bridge down and allow you to come into their space, literally and figuratively, and affect change in their lives. So what happens when that bridge stays up? Oftentimes, we get frustrated. And then once we're frustrated, the lowest parts of our character then take over. And some examples of those low character traits are manipulation, but the biggest one is control. So when our best intentions based on love and care and empathy and consideration aren't well received, there's something that happens inside of us that shifts. And in that shift, it's almost as if the person that we're trying to help change puts a mirror in front of us. And then we see ourselves. And it ceases to be about affecting change for the good in their lives and more about how does this look from my perspective if they don't do this, if they're not acting this way, if they're not performing this way. One of the greatest examples is when you have children and you have lived a certain life up until that point, right? You've had ups and downs, you've had mountains and valleys and everything in between. So you have a wealth of knowledge and experience that you're bringing to the table. And then you have children and they go out into the world. And we instinctively think that, okay, these are my children. They've got my last name. So they're going to be picture perfect representations of me and all the good things about me. But that's not how it works. First of all, the children are on loan to you. They're God's children that are on loan to you to raise in this earthly realm that we have, first and foremost. Secondly, you were never perfect. So what makes you think that you're going to have children that were perfect? But I digress. That's not the point. The point of the matter is when we send our children out into the world and we have this false assumption that they're going to be picture perfect versions of us and they're not, then the mirror is in front of us. And we think that if our children in the world aren't perfect versions of us, then somehow that's going to be a reflection on who we are as people. Our entire lives are now on display because our children are X, Y, and Z. And that's just not how life works. So when that happens, we often resort to trying to control. We resort to trying to manipulate the situation in an effort to affect change. And it also applies to personal relationships, right? We, particularly when you're married and now you're sharing so many things with another person, you're sharing last name, you're sharing income, you're sharing household, you're sharing responsibilities, you're sharing your life. You're essentially giving somebody a huge portion of your life, be it your time, the years, your resources, your life, right? And so when you're that connected with someone, there is a certain weight to that, WEIGHT, a weight, a heaviness to it. It's a responsibility, right? It's a sacrifice, is what it is. So when you're in that type of a relationship, that level of intimacy, then we want the other person to be a representation of who we are, what we stand for. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're erasing the individualism or the individuality of that person. But again, as same for as the example with our children, when these people are out in the world, they are what we believe to be representations of us. And when all things are going well and we approve of how they represent us, then everything is hunky dory, everything is okay. But what happens when that person has their own opinion that's outside of yours? What happens when they carry themselves in a way that you don't carry yourself? What happens when um, they do things that you wouldn't necessarily do? Well, then again, that proverbial mirror is placed in front of our face, and then we falsely, wrongly assume that their behavior, who they are, is a representation of who we are. And the last thing that we want to do is to have essentially our deepest fears and insecurities placed on the big screen via someone else's behavior, someone else's walk, someone else's who they are, how they carry themselves, right? And so when our deepest insecurities, when we feel like our deepest insecurities are being exposed, then we clam up, we clamor for control. And again, control is just an illusion. So what do? We try to we do several things Some people browbeat. Some people talk, 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 talk to try to get that thing to drill it into you. No, no, you need to do this. You need to do that. You shouldn't do this, so forth and so on. We drill it. We drill it until the cows come home. And we think that by drilling it, that this is somehow affecting change. Well, it's a temporary feeling of, it's a temporary win. Whereas you feel like I'm getting my point across. I'm letting them know how their behavior, how they carry themselves, XYZ, how that affects me and my name and my reputation and so forth. And let's give a disclaimer right now. This is not, if someone's behavior is detrimental, if it's criminal, if it's harmful, if it's anything like that, that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the simple fact that God made each and every one of us as individuals. So we're all uniquely and wonderfully made. And none of us have the right to tell somebody else essentially how to live their lives. We all have the choice and the free will to live our lives the way we want to. This is not a conversation about what's right and what's wrong, so forth and so on. This is simply about you deciding that someone should change and resorting to manipulative, controlling means to try to get them to change. That's where the wheels come off. That's where in our professional and personal lives, the wheels come off. Again, no one changes until they're ready. So what do we do then? What do we do when all of our efforts to try and change someone fall short? Do we just wash our hands and say, to hell with them? They're not worth it? That's what most people do. If if you see that they should change and they don't see that they should change, or they're not in a place right now where they want to change or see the value in it, then we just dismiss people, you know. And listen, you have the right to remove yourself from any situation or scenario that is not meeting your needs. It's not up to par with your standard, right? So let's just leave that there. Well, let's just lay that out there. You have the right to not be with someone who is unwilling to change to meet your standards, right? That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is you having a desire to affect change in someone's life. What are the best methods with which to do so? In my experience, what I have learned through experience, what I have studied, is that the best way to affect change in other people's lives is to first make changes in your life. That's the mic drop. That's what you came here for. That's the truth. That's the answer. How do you get people to change? You make changes. That's the truth that no one wants to hear. That's the truth that no one wants to deal with. So let's break that down. Let's break that down. So let's say you're in a personal relationship and someone is behaving in a way that is beneath the standard to which you want to be in a relationship. And you have tried to talk to them. You have tried to affect change in that way or some other ways, and nothing is working. Nothing is working. Well, what do you do? What you do is change how you respond to them. What you do is to go within, create a standard for yourself, set boundaries, set um, um, consequences. That's the word I'm looking for. Set boundaries, set consequences, and allow the person to operate within those confines, to operate within your boundaries, to operate within your standard. And if they choose not to, then we don't then go harder and try to browbeat them or, you know, talk to try to get them to change. What we do then is allow the standard to affect them. So that's kind of hypothetical. Let's bring it home and make it make sense. What that means is instead of using the methods that have already failed you in your attempt to get them to change, allow the changes that you make as a person, as an individual, to create an atmosphere where your words, there's no words that you can speak that will be louder than the actions that you take or don't take. Actions speak louder than words. Actions speak louder than words. And here's the truth of the matter. If we go back to the example of parent and child, here's the truth of the matter. There is nothing, no words, no lectures, nothing that will influence your children more than your personal behavior. There's nothing that will influence your children more than your integrity. And so that's that mirror that we were mentioning. Because the truth of the matter is, you've been lying to you. The truth of the matter is that you're not holding your end of the bargain. And if we're not holding our end of the bargain up, then we cannot expect to just miraculously for people to miraculously see past that. And that's the thing. There's something unspoken. There's something that is communicated, not necessarily through words, but there's something that's communicated to other people. We communicate something to other people when we don't have integrity, when we don't keep our words to ourselves. And so when we're talking about parenting, I believe particularly as kids get older, they can start to see through the veil, as it were. And if you're not the kind of person that's keeping your word to yourself, walking in integrity, then it's going to be harder and harder to try to convince or manipulate or control our children into just doing what we won't do for ourselves. So we say all that to say that the greatest, most effective, efficient way to affect change in other people's lives is to first look inward and to address the things in your life that need changing first. And there's something about doing that that creates an atmosphere that whoever enters it is better prepared to evaluate themselves and come to terms with who they are and who they want to be. And we all have an innate desire to be the best version of ourselves. I genuinely believe that we all have an innate desire to be the best versions of ourselves. I believe that it's circumstances and experiences and connections with other people, places, and things that sort of circumvent that natural desire. So if you're the type of person that lives a life of integrity, that walks upright, that holds yourself to a higher standard, if you're that type of person, everywhere you go potentially is an opportunity. Everything you do potentially is an opportunity to affect change all around you. And if you're a person of great influence, if you have a large following, then you are in a greater position to affect change because people will respond to your authenticity. People will respond to your authenticity. But let's not look at it from that large scale. Let's look at it from just you and your family, you and your spouse, your partner, your children, you on your job, wherever you find yourself. The greatest way to affect change in other people's lives is to be the kind of person that embodies what you'd like to see in the world, what you'd like to see in individuals, your friends, your family, your community, your nation, this world. So that is how you change people. You change people by changing yourself. And it's hard work. It's hard work. We've discussed how hard it is to actually try to convince someone to change who may or may not want to change. It's even harder to face inward and change yourself. But that's where the work is. That's where the work is. So I hope this video helped you. If it did, please share it with someone who could use this type of information. Share it with someone who's been beating themselves over the head on why they can't change the people they love, why they can't change their community or their nation or this world. Send this to somebody who's struggling with that. As usual, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Most people who see this video, the statistics say have not subscribed. So go ahead and take a moment to hit that subscribe button. Really helps the channel out. And until the next podcast, stay blessed, keep your peace.